Chapter 9, Lesson 3, Two-Way Tables. Our objective for the day is to be able to construct and interpret two-way tables. We do have two vocabulary words that are in this lesson. The first one is relative frequency and the second one is two-way table. First of all, focusing on relative frequency. Relative frequency is the ratio of the value of a subtotal to the value of the total. Another way to think about that could be comparing part to whole or a piece of something to the total of something. We'll be looking at relative frequencies after we construct two-way tables to compare the categories that we are constructing or setting up our two-way tables with. So starting on page 690, you can see there's an example of a two-way table at the top. When we think about two-way tables, we use two-way tables to show data from a sample group as it's relating to two different categories. The biggest thing when we're thinking about these is you can only have two different categories. I like to think of situations where, as you can see on 690, if you're a person that plays a sport, you play a sport. You're either going to play a sport or you will not play a sport. The other way to think of it is on the honor roll. You're either on the honor roll or you're not on the honor roll. There's no in between with that. It's either yes, you are there, or no, you are not. Same thing with you either play a sport or you do not play a sport. So the example that they have given us on the top of 690 shows us the setup using a two-way table, which you can get information from a Venn diagram sometimes, and they take that information and plug it into the table. So you will notice, and it doesn't matter how you set these up in terms of you're playing a sport, do not play a sport, could be over here on the left. On the honor roll, not on the honor roll could be at the top, or the way it is set up here. That does not matter. When you look at these, you're going to notice that at the end you will see a total. The total on the right here gives us the total for the number of students that are on the honor roll. As we can see, is 365. Not on the honor roll would be 75. When I add that column up, I should get 440. The total down here is when we take a look and look at students who play a sport and students who do not play a sport. We can add those up. Again, that row should equal the same as your column. When we are looking at these and working with these, if for some reason those numbers do not match up, we have a mistake somewhere, so we have to go back and try to find out where that is. In order to understand these two-way tables, when we look at this and I see the number 250, what that means is I have 250 students who are on the honor roll and play a sport. When we look at the number 115, what that means is we have 115 students that are on the honor roll but do not play a sport. Moving down to the second row, when I look at the number 45, what that means is I have 45 students who are not on the honor roll but do play a sport. And then the number 30 would represent those students that are not on the honor roll and those that do not play a sport. Okay, so if I'm a student that's not on the honor roll and I do not play a sport, I would fall into this category right here. And then you can see down here they've added those totals up to get your totals. So as we take a look at example 1, this one is talking about students who have MP3 players or cell phones. So when we look at setting this up, the information at the top is looking at surveying students. He's looking at information of students either having cell phones or no cell phones, and then students that have MP3 players or no MP3 players. From there, we're going to take the information that they have given us and try to fill it into our two-way table, and then we can use our math skills or our computation skills to figure out the rest. So reading it, it says Felipe surveyed students at his school. He found that 78 students own a cell phone and 57 of those students own an MP3 player. There are 13 students that do not own a cell phone but own an MP3 player. 9 students do not own either device. Construct a two-way table summarizing the data. So the very first step we want to do is to set up our table where we're comparing cell phone and no cell phone, MP3 player, no MP3 player, and then we have our totals at the end. When we take a look at this first piece of information, we know that 78 students own a cell phone. So when I take a look at my row where cell phone is, I know that I have a total of 78 of them. So I've plugged in the number 78 under the total. We know that 57 of those students, now this is important to think about, 57 of those students, so 57 of the 78 own an MP3 player. So what that means is we have 57 students who own a cell phone and an MP3 player. So the number 57 has been written in there. We also know that there's 13 students that do not own a cell phone but own an MP3 player. So what I'm thinking is right here, I know where it says no cell phone, they're not going to own a cell phone, but they do have that MP3 player. So we're moving over, following the row and the column where that would be. And I've plugged the number 13 in there. 9 students do not own either. So with that one, we are looking at the spot where there's no cell phone, no MP3 player, and we've plugged the number 9 in there. Now from there, we can go ahead and finish filling this in. I have that there are 57 students that have cell phones and MP3 players, and I have 13 students who have no cell phone but an MP3 player. So I can go ahead and I can add those two numbers up. So I should be thinking 57 plus 13. And when I do that, I would come up with 70. I also know that 13 have no cell phone but an MP3 player and 9 have neither. So I should be able to take 13 plus 9 and I can get 22. Again, after that I can work on, I know 57 plus some number here with no MP3 player should equal 78. So I can work backwards and ask myself 78 minus 57 gives me what number, and that would be 21. So from there, once I've plugged 21 in, I know that I can take 21 plus 9 and get 30, which means then on the bottom row, I should be able to add 70 plus 30 together and get 100. We know that 13 plus 9 was 22, so 78 plus 22 is 100. Looking at the top of 691, there's a got it problem that you can use for an example for practice. There are 150 children at summer camp and 71 signed up for swimming. There were a total of 62 children that signed up for canoeing and 28 of them also signed up for swimming. Construct a two-way table summarizing the data. So you can see with Got It Problem A, they have already set up the table for you. We're looking at children that swim and don't swim, children that canoe and no canoeing. So go ahead and look at your numbers at the top and the information they gave you. Take a minute, plug those numbers in, pause the video, complete the table. When you're finished, come back and I will have the answers for you. As you can see, after you have practiced with Got It Problem, letter A, the number of students that like both swimming and canoeing is 28. So 28 should have been plugged in there. We also know that there was a total of 62 children that signed up for canoeing. So the last spot in the column of canoeing, they've plugged in the number 62. We know that 71 signed up for swimming, so the total for swimming at the end of that row should be 71. We know that there's 150 children at summer camp, so that would be our total. After you've plugged those four numbers in, then we can fill in the rest of them. So looking at swimming and no canoeing should have been 43. Looking at no swimming and canoeing should be 34, with a total of 79. Looking at no swimming and no canoeing was 45. And then no canoeing total is 88. Looking at the next part of the lesson, then interpreting relative frequencies. So what we will be doing is we are going to be looking at information in our two-way tables and interpreting or understanding what those numbers mean and the frequency of that, or how many times that occurs actually means. The biggest part when you are interpreting relative frequencies is to understand whether you should interpret them by rows or by columns. Please remember that rows run from left to right and columns will run up and down. So I'm going to use the Got It Problem example that they gave you to kind of discuss what or how to interpret these relative frequencies. Let's pretend, for example, they wanted me to interpret these relative frequencies by column. So column, I'm thinking up and down. What you are going to do, as we talked about before, relative frequency is going to represent the part or the piece out of the total. So when I look at my first column of canoeing, I know I have 28 students who are going to be canoeing out of the total of 62. So I should be thinking 28 over 62 because it's a ratio, or 28 divided by 62. And when you take 28 and divide it by 62 on your calculator, I'm going to come up with 0.4516, so about 45% when we change that decimal to a percent of those students would be swimming, canoeing out of the total. If I look at not canoeing, we know that's 43 out of 88. So again, I'm thinking the ratio of 43 over 88, so 43 divided by 88, and that gives me about 48%. If we were to look at that in terms of rows, then we are looking from left to right. So swimming in this case would be 28 out of 71. No swimming would be 34 out of 79. Okay, total, okay, we can think 62 divided by 150. When we add our percentages or our relative frequencies together, they should total 100%. So let's take a look at the example 2 on 691 that they have given us. So we are going back and looking at the cell phone and the MP3 example that we've already looked at earlier. So in this case, they are looking at the relative frequencies of students by rows. Again, rows are running from left to right. So we're thinking 57 out of the total of 78. So 57 divided by 78 is about 73%. Then I'm thinking 21 out of the total of 78, which gives me about 0.27 or 27%. Again, when we're interpreting by rows, we're looking left to right, and so I should be thinking or double checking 73% plus 27% gives me 100%. Then I'm going to look at no cell phone row. I've got 13 out of 22 total, which is about 59%, 9 out of 22, which is about 41%, and again, when we add those together, we should get 100%. If it's asking you to interpret by rows, you just look rows. You do not need to do anything with columns. And vice versa, if they ask you to interpret by columns, then you don't do anything with the rows. From there, then on the top of 692, they have given us a two-way table where the numbers have already been put in. They do not have the total column for the rows because on this situation we're looking at columns. So we are thinking up and down. So as I look at my MP3 player column, and cell phone, I've got 57 students out of the total of 70. I look at no MP3 player and cell phone, I've got 21 out of 30. So please pause your video now at this time and go ahead and fill in your relative frequencies and then check when you are finished. As we double check our math or the math that you have done for Got It Problem B, we can see that 57 divided by 70 is about 0.81 or 81%. 13 divided by 70 is about 1900ths or 19%. When I look at those two percentages or decimals and add them together, we should get 1 or 100%. Looking at no MP3 player, 21 out of 30, we should get about 70%, and 9 out of 30 is about 30%, and again, when we add those up, we're going to get 100%. At this time, you can go ahead and take a look at the sample practice problems that I have attached on the third slide. These are our practice problems from a skills worksheet, or you can go ahead and look at page 693 in your book.